This is Frank Islam, Chairman and CEO of FY Investment Group, and your host of Washington Calling, where we interview leading voices from business, politics, from art and culture, and explore the topics that impact you to the viewer. Today, we are fortunate to have a guest, and her name is Salima Hashmi. And she is the daughter of renowned poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz, which is a wonderful story, and a professor of art for 30 years at the National College of Arts in Lahore, Pakistan. She is currently the Dean of the School of Visual Arts at Beacon House National University in Lahore. She works to bring about Indo-Pakistani reconciliation by developing artistic projects that go beyond the two countries' borders. She is a human rights activist and a painter. So welcome to our show, Salima, and thank you for coming to our show. And so welcome to our show. Looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Well, you are a daughter of a renowned poet. As a result of that, we have a lot of admiration and respect for you. As I understand, you're an artist, author, feminist, civil rights activist, and a champion of South Asian peace and harmony. You have indeed a very impressive profile. You seem to wear many hats. So I'm wondering, how do you juggle many things and be effective?
Well, I think being a woman helps, because I think women from the very early time of their lives learn to juggle many, many things. We very often don't give them credit for it. But the fact remains, if you go into any of our rural areas and you see what women have to do, I mean, child rearing is just one very small part of it. You know, they are tending to the animals, they're looking after everything that happens in the household, and they're out in the fields at harvest time, or if it's not harvest time, they're taking the meals out to the men who are working in the field. I've even seen in recent years that very often it's the women who are tilling the land, simply because I think so many men have left the country to go and look for work abroad. And there's also now a growing desire for women to get education. And therefore, you find the droves of young women from all over the country who are coming into universities and excelling. And that is something that I at least take great pride in, but I'm also highly inspired because, you know, I'm a very ancient lady. And I have
You're not an ancient lady, you're a wonderful lady.
And I've seen the sea change in women's lives in South Asia, not just in Pakistan. It's happening all over because I do travel to other parts of South Asia. I've seen how the numbers have changed. I've seen how women have struggled and, you know, taken up positions which they were not considered for earlier. They've entered the workforce for a very large number of reasons. So for me, to wear many hats is just something that becomes part of your life. You don't plan it that way, but because you're engaged with everything that's going on, you become a human rights activist, you become a women's rights activist, you become a child rights activist. All the time you are being creative. For me, my teaching has been the anchor. I've taught at the National College of Art for 30 years, and after I retired, a new university started. So they asked me to start all over again, which I did. But in fact, I stepped down from being a dean. I'm now professor emerita there. But that doesn't mean you stop mentoring artists. And I mentor artists, not just Pakistani artists, but artists who come from other parts of South Asia to study in Pakistan. So it's a holistic life. I have been
Holistic life. That's a
an
very
actor
good. So
an
you have
actor.
undertaken the task of recording the life and work of female artists in Pakistan in a book. You wrote a book. What made you do that?
Mhm. Well, you know how political and social events, they alter your life. And I think artists, perhaps more than anybody, And when I say artists, I mean people in the creative field. I mean poets, I mean musicians, I mean filmmakers, I mean theater people. They're much more sensitive and they act like the radar in a society. So when, the worst martial law occurred in Pakistan of General Zia-ul-Haq, and new laws which targeted the minorities and targeted women and targeted, vulnerable sectors of society happened, I reacted. I reacted and got together other women like myself who were artists and had a meeting. And we wrote out uh, something called the Manifesto for Women Artists of Pakistan. And it was a secret document because at that time we couldn't make it public. But basically, we said that, our work and our artistic endeavor must be to bring our people greater awareness, enter their struggle. It must reflect women. And that's what made me think, okay, I looked around and I saw, well, my male friends were making compromises, but my women friends were not. And I thought, okay, this is an interesting story here. Let's think about writing something on the women artists of Pakistan. So I set about, I interviewed a large number of artists of various generations, starting from those who were my teachers. And because they were the first generation, I was lucky enough to have interviews with them, and most of them have now passed away. So it's an important document. And then there were my peers, and then there were the younger generation, and then the absolutely new generation, who are now quite internationally well known. So it was a saga which covered 50 years of our story. And it's called Unveiling the Visible, Lives and Works of Women, Pakistani women artists.
Very well said. Would you be able to shine a bright light on India-Pakistan reconciliation, especially through art? You engage in this because you were born in India or because of the other reason. And you're also against a nuclear weapon, and especially nuclear weapon that's produced in India and Pakistan, is because you believe that we should be fighting against hunger and disease, not nuclear weapons. Am I correct to assume that?
Absolutely. And that is precisely what has made me an anti-nuclear weapon activist. But before that, before the two countries were, I would say, idiotic enough to test their weaponry, long before that, I think I inherited this desire to see peace in the subcontinent, because my father was very much a proponent of peace in South Asia. He was a
Where was your
proponent of
father
peace.
born in India? Where is your father born in India?
No, my father was born in what is now Pakistan. He was born in Sialkot. So the
Oh,
home, yes, the hometown of Allama Iqbal. He shared that
oh,
the town
wonderful.
and place of birth with him. So he was very much a Punjabi, like Allama Iqbal, and he was one of those people who believed that development and all the things that we aspired to in the freedom struggle could only be achieved if there was peace in South Asia, in the subcontinent. And so he was somebody whose poetry never dwelt on sort of empty nationalist slogans. There was love of the land, but it was not based on hatred of the other. And this is something that I inherited. I remember as a little girl, I was 4 years old when there was partition, and my mother was bringing us back from Kashmir into Lahore, and there was a lot of killing in a place called Murray, and my mother and other women got together, and they took out a peace demonstration. And as a little girl, I was put in the front on a donkey, in
This
these
is
hill
this is how you
stations. So I sat there and I had a white flag in my hand as a little girl. And I've been carrying that white flag ever since then. And and this is something that I have inculcated in my students also, that our job as artists, as creative people, is not to bring about hatred between other human beings, but to think about what makes life saner and much more beautiful. And that has to do with peace, because humanism is the basic value. And so I've been doing it, forever. I was one of the people who organized the first group that went to India of artists and artistic teachers in 1986. We were a group of 40, the biggest group that had ever
Okay.
been. And we, and I remember, I was wondering, okay, these students who I'm taking, they're the generation who's been brought up on anti-Indian rhetoric, everything in the media and the newspapers and blah, blah, blah. And so all I said to them that, you're ambassadors of your country when you cross the border. And the lovely thing was, as soon as we got across, we got into Delhi, we went by train. The first thing I said, okay, what do you want to see? Madam, we want to go to a mandir. We want to see a temple. The curiosity was so much about the other. And they just loved being there. We went to Jaipur, we went to, of course, Agra. And, everywhere they went, they would sit down and they would start singing and they'd draw a crowd around them. And what was wonderful was the fact that they were devoid of any feeling of sort of hatred or something in which they felt that, okay, these people are difficult to get on with. It was one of the most illuminating experiences for them. And
Very
I
good.
must say that their art reflected that. So this has
Yeah.
been my belief.
As President Kennedy says, art engages us, connects us. It is a city on the hill.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about your work. You work for a number of South Asian organizations such as Sapan, which what's the name? Bina Sarwar,
Yes.
and South Asia Foundation. What makes you so optimistic about the future of the South Asia, considering the fact the friction and mistrust between India and Pakistan? And by the way, I love your thoughts on the going to the temple and being inclusive, and we can help shape a better future for America and for the world if we are in this together.
Absolutely. And I feel that especially young people who have not been tainted by propaganda, they are far more open and they're far more curious
Yes.
to know about the lives of others. So if you don't hold them back and if you allow them that voyage of discovery, you will find that they will always respond with both with warmth, and they'll also you will find that they will discover things that are in common. And they don't mind the things that are different because they too are things that they can think about. At the end of the day, we are human beings, all of us, and we have the same needs. And those people who are creative, and we know that because we've experienced the great affection that people in the subcontinent have for poetry, for music, for films, for
For art,
dance,
for art,
art, So it's really these cultural bonds which make it so easy
right.
to forget that there are differences.
Art, as President Kennedy once said, art nourishes the roots of our culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you're also a human rights activist, particularly women's rights, and you live right next to the Afghanistan. Afghanistan does not have any women's rights. They question that, and they are. My question to you is, how do you go about? There's no equality in Afghanistan for the male as well as for the female counterpart, which is the male counterpart as well. My question is why? Why is that? And how do you make sure that doesn't happen again?
Well, as you know, this is the darkest time
It
ever
is the darkest time.
for the women in Afghanistan. I mean, it's not much better for the men either, but for women in particular. And I feel deeply, deeply disturbed by it because over the last 20 years or so, it has been my good fortune to have students, women and men, from Afghanistan coming to study art in Lahore at Beacon House National University. Not just from Afghanistan, but actually across South Asia.
Right.
So we've had students from Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and believe it or not, even from India.
That's a
And we have
wonderful. I'm
managed
so glad.
yeah.
What part of
It's
India?
because there was a
What
very
part?
visionary, it's a very visionary person called Madanjit Singh, who
Yeah.
was a UNESCO ambassador.
Okay, I
And
do
he
know.
left this endowment. He believed in peace in South Asia. He believed in SARC. And so he set up this foundation and made it possible for students from all of the SARC countries to go. So you have a program of water management in Sri Lanka. You have one of law in Bangladesh. You have journalism in India. And the students go, except it's so difficult to get visas. We know all that. But somehow I've managed. So I've had these wonderful Afghan girls who in these 20 years have matured into artists who become internationally well known. One of them, Kubra Khademi, who had to run from Afghanistan. She had to be evacuated with the help of the French embassy. The UNESCO did that. And so they have been, she is now, when the Taliban took over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we had to evacuate some of our former students. We had networks of artists in these 20 years. These young people who studied in Lahore, they've built their own networks everywhere. And they helped them evacuate from Afghanistan. They are now in different parts of the world, Australia and Europe and Switzerland, everywhere.
Yeah, they are.
And the work that they're producing is amazing. So I'm never pessimistic. I always feel even if one person, through their art, can tell the story, we have succeeded.
That's a good way to put it, because the fact that the one person can make a difference and
Yes.
meaningful difference.
Yes.
You are a daughter of the legendary South Asian poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz. My question to you is, I hope you remember some of the lines from your father's poem. Can you recite some?
Well, they are, at different times in my life, there have been different favorites. And, sometimes somebody will come up to me and they'll say, so-and-so is my favorite poem of Faiz. What is your favorite? And at that moment, I have to quickly think of something. And I've noticed that over years, my favorites have changed. And but there's one poem that keeps coming back to me. And that's a poem that he wrote in 1947.
Oh my gosh.
At the time of partition.
At the
And
time of
it's
the
called
partition.
Subhaya Azadi. Yeah, morning of the birth of freedom, the dawn of freedom. And it starts in this sad way. Ye daag daag ujala, ye shab guzida sahar. ये वो सहर तो नहीं, वो इंतजार था जिसका, ये वो सहर तो नहीं. चले थे यार के मिल जाएगी कहीं ना कहीं. चले थे यार मिल जाएगी कहीं ना कहीं, फल की दश्त में तारों की आखिरी मंजिल. And translated roughly, it's that, this leprous brightness, this dawn which reeks of night, this is not the one, the long-awaited morn. This is not the shining light that beckoned us men or ever onwards to go on seeking the final starry destination in the heavens, the final edge where ends the endless night. But at the end of the poem, he says, अभी गिरानी शब में कमी नहीं आई, निजाते दीदा दिल की घड़ी नहीं आई, चले चलो कि वो मंजिल अभी नहीं आई. The dark weight of night is not lifted yet, and the heart and the eye have not found their rest. Let us press on, for the culmination is not yet. So, this is a poem that keeps coming back to me, especially when things look bleak. And these days you look around the world and my God, is it a bleak time?
It is.
And then think, you know, then I think ye daag daag ujala, ye shab guzida sahar, wo intezar tha jiska, ye wo sahar to nahi. I tell myself कि, you know, कि नहीं चले चलो. So
That's a good
वो
way to
मंजिल
put
आ
it. That's it.
जाए.
Do you know Aligarh Muslim University?
Sorry?
Aligarh Muslim University,
Of
AMU.
course, I've been there. Yes, I've been there. I visited it.
When did you visit?
Oh, well, it was a very long time ago at the time when visas were easier to get than these days.
1980s.
Yes. No, I went in, I think it was 2011 when it was my father's centennial and they celebrated it.
Oh, that's
And
wonderful.
so it was wonderful because they celebrated it in Delhi also. The President of India celebrated his 100 years, and Aligarh Muslim University celebrated it, and they celebrated it in,
Who was
you
the
know,
Vice Chancellor at that time?
I don't remember. It was so long ago, and
General Shah. General Shah was the Vice Chancellor.
no, I think he came later. He came later. I'm not sure. Can't remember exactly. But it was a very nice ceremony. My nephew came with him, Dr. Ali Hashmi, who's written a biography of my father.
Oh,
So it's very nice. And you know, they had young poets also reciting. They had a mushaira also. It was
it was wonderful.
very emotive.
I
Yes.
was born in Aligarh,
Really? Aha. Okay.
and I came here when I was 10 years old to the United States.
Aha. Right.
And I
Okay.
have and there's several things at Aligarh that energize us. Frank and Debbie Islam Management Complex and auditorium, and there's many things that we have given several $1 million to have what I consider not to get our name, but to make
Uh-huh.
sure that it's an innovation center, there's entrepreneurship center, people can be energized by our contributions and who we are.
Absolutely. And it is only through, I feel, through the passion that we put into education,
And commitment.
that actually, and the commitment that you put there, that we can hope to build a better human being.
What's wonderful. And thank you for watching the show. This is Frank Islam wishing you a great week. And thank you, Salma and
Thank you.